over the years, I developed what I call the micro marketing method, which is a set of tools that I use to consistently increase my influence and authority and make intimate connections at scale, but without relying on tactics that I think might be a little bit more popular or trendy, but that really feel cringy to me or really antithetical to me.
Welcome back to the Empowered Woman, Badass, and Unfiltered podcast. Your host, Olivia, here. And today we are talking about micro marketing, scaling intimacy, and social media monogamy. And we're doing that with Jannotta, and I'm so happy to have her here. She's been an entrepreneur for almost a decade. And I'd like you to just share your story. But before you do that, guys, her links are in the show notes below, or the description below, depending on where you're consuming this content. So yeah, share with me your story.
Hi, Olivia. So yes, I'm Eva. I go by she, her pronouns. And gosh, it was very exciting to hear you say that I've been an entrepreneur for nearly a decade, because I hadn't put it in so many words to myself yet. So that was very fun. So yeah, I started my business when I was in my mid-20s, and I started it out of a situation that probably at least some of you listening can relate to, which is that my corporate job imploded. And I wasn't expecting that to happen. I wasn't hoping that would happen, but it did. And so I was left with to kind of pick up the pieces of my self-confidence and my sense of what I was doing and why I was doing it. And in hindsight, it's funny to me that I decided to start a business rather than just get a different job. But at the time, I was very intimidated by the idea of job hunting and interviewing and figuring out what job to apply for and how to kind of position my skill set, because the job that imploded was my first job out of college. So I didn't have a lot of experience. And hilariously, in hindsight, I thought, oh, starting a business will be easier, which I'm glad that I didn't realize how challenging it could be at the time, because my naivete was a strength in the beginning. But anyway, to wrap that story up, I decided to start a business, and I at first was offering kind of general marketing and communications services to women entrepreneurs. And that broad category, not in the least bit niched, served me okay for a couple of years. I was able to build my business by word of mouth and networking and trying a lot of things and saying yes to almost anybody who would pay me. But over time and with experience and with, just some growth, I ended up niching more specifically into thought leadership, training, and advising. So now I work with women leaders who tend to be consultants, coaches, speakers, and authors, or some combination of the above. I help them to translate the wisdom and the opinions and the insights from between their ears into pieces of writing that they can publish to the world and can make an impact.
That is super cool, by the way, because I didn't realize that was exactly what you did. So that is so cool. And I haven't heard of anybody doing that. So is it specifically for books or for copy, sales copy or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is yes. And so I do work with a lot of authors, while I have worked with authors on editing and content guidance for their full length books, they also tend to work with me on the actual book launch. And where thought leadership is involved in a book launch, a book itself is a big piece of thought leadership. But to market and launch a book requires a lot of different moving parts and variables and audience growth and putting yourself out there, and shorter form pieces of thought leadership, which is what my company I really specialize in, like articles, like emails to a growing email list, like social media posts. Having a really robust and consistent practice for publishing those shorter think pieces really helps authors, speakers, and really anyone who is ambitious and wants to grow their influence and impact and authority really helps them to establish that in a consistent, committed way.
That is super cool because I work with so many authors myself, like just from like
Yes.
podcasting. And I want to write a book one day, and one of my goals is
Hell
to be
yeah.
a New York Times bestselling author. And it was so funny because I was asking people for a friend. I was asking for a friend, you know, what for those of you that have published a book, you've gone through a publisher, what was your process? I just asked it on Facebook and I got a lot of different feedback. But the ones that annoyed me the most are like, oh, just go self-publish through Amazon. It's not what I asked. I like for one, it's not for me, but I'm like, I really looked at it. I'm like, you can't be a New York Times bestselling author being self-published. Like that just don't happen. Like, what are we doing here? You need people to help you out. So understanding what your goals are super important. So would you say that you help your clients like identify what their goals are before you start your projects with them?
Yes and no. I mean, gosh, I have such a kind of push-pull relationship, even with the concept of goals. I wrote an article, a piece of thought leadership myself, not long ago about why I hate goal setting. And so let me try to gather my thoughts so I don't go on a super long-winded tangent. But what I think can be challenging about goals is they change. We are evolving beings. And so some of us, like you, Olivia, have these big kind of milestones that we want to cross. And maybe they've been really dear to us since we were young, and maybe they're going to be dear to us forever. And I think that is actually less common than those of us who have more kind of vague goals, or even just a sense of how we'd like to feel, but we're not sure what we would need to accomplish or set up for ourselves to enable those feelings or to support those feelings. And so in terms of goal setting with my clients, yes, we talk about goals when it comes to, how do you want your book launch, for example, to unfold? What do you want that to look like? What's important to you? What's less important to you? What's important to your publisher? There's different kind of variables in the mix. And then, but that's a very short-term set of goals, which I find typically easier to wrestle with than big goals, which tend to be, for a lot of us, I think, very kind of amorphous. Most of us want to have an impact. Most of us want to leave the world a better place than how we found it. Most of us want to have enriching relationships. And these are all goals, but they're not super succinct or quantifiable goals the way something like get on the New York Times bestselling list is. And so, when I work with clients with a shorter term project like a book launch, we do tend to get more specific about goals, but I typically work with clients over the long term, especially my private clients, because we're doing a lot of consistent thought leadership production and distribution for them. And in those cases, sometimes they have specific goals like, oh, I want to raise my speaker fee. I need to have a bigger platform to kind of merit a higher speaking fee. And there's usually like, I want to make the world better. I want to have an impact. I want to connect with people. And so I don't believe we need to, especially in the beginning, quantify those goals any more specifically than just what I said. So I like to kind of leave that there.
Oh, I definitely understand exactly where you're coming from with that too. Just like making sure you have that clear direction, and as far as they have that expectation as well, but not for me, like I think goal setting, I was such a big like goal setter, but I'm also like a really big habit builder to achieve those specific
Smart.
goals. But I'm like really, I do get very specific, but like those things. So one area that I've really excelled in life at is making friends
Me
and
too.
meeting quality people and building
Yes.
quality relationships. I've really excelled at that. So it's like me having like a lot of the issues that I feel like other people in our age group have when it comes to like making new friends and stuff like that. I just don't have, because I'm like, they got an app for that. Like
Same. I could make friends with a stop sign.
like, because I'm really big into having genuine and authentic relationships. And it was
Yeah.
just something you mentioned. And I'm like, it's one of those things that I guess I take for granted. But to switch back over, you are obviously working with so many different types of people and you spoke about growing their audience. You spoke about, increasing their speaker fees, things like that, as goals that they might have with working with you. So how does micro marketing come into play when it comes to growing on social?
Yes. So let me start with just sharing something about myself. So one of the challenges, I guess we all face this to some degree or other, but like there's the challenge of like figuring out what you're like and making peace with what you're like and how it relates to the world. And what I mean by that specifically is I tend to be a very emotional person. I cry very easily. I tend to be very empathic. I tend to be really sensitive. So I find that I'm sensitive to noise and I get overstimulated easily. And I also tend to be introverted. So even though I'm outgoing and I love making friends, I also really crave solitude and recovery time. And that's how I get my energy, is being alone or being in one-on-one relationships. And, the world doesn't always accommodate or celebrate some of those characteristics. And as I became an entrepreneur and started learning about marketing and sales and how to grow a business, a lot of the advice that I felt I was being bombarded with really, like, what's the word I want? It like really shoved up against, in an uncomfortable, unpleasant way, my preferred way of building relationships, or how my energy works and how I most feel enriched and energized by conversation or by activities. And so over the years, I developed what I call the micro marketing method, which is a set of tools that I use to consistently increase my influence and authority and make intimate connections at scale, but without relying on tactics that I think might be a little bit more popular or trendy, but that really feel cringy to me or really antithetical to me. And so to answer your question more specifically, how does micro marketing relate to some of the thought leadership work we talked about? Well, you could thought lead exclusively in your journal if you wanted. If that was what you wanted to do, that is valid. And that is not an asset for growing your business or establishing your authority or increasing your influence and making an impact, right? So there's a gap between the thought leadership practice itself and distributing it, really getting it out in front of people so that it can impact them and it can influence the decisions they make, the ways they think about the world, and how they grow. So in that gap, there has to be some sort of marketing. There has to be some sort of, publicity or PR strategy or anything. There's a lot of different options you have for distribution and getting the word out about something. And the tools that I've chosen that I call micro marketing are really well suited to leaders who tend to have some of the characteristics I mentioned, who tend to be sensitive, empathic, introverted, or ambiverted, and also who tend to have a contrarian streak. So they kind of don't want to follow the status quo. They don't want to do things the way other people do them. They really want to zig if everyone else is zagging. So does that answer your question, Olivia?
Yeah. I really like what you said with like micro marketing basically being making intimate connections at scale.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. And like that's something that like appeals more to me because I'm like, I've been doing the whole like I'm on the social platforms, but I feel like people don't really get to see the real. I share the real on my podcast. You know what I mean? Like I'll share if I'm going through a hard time and all that other stuff. So it's not like I hide that, but I'm not putting that in a 30-second to 90-second clip. I'm not doing that. I'm sorry. I'm also, when I write about things and I like announce them, like I mostly just share my life now. I'm in a weird transitional part in my life. So Um, and I hate the label of like extrovert and introvert and
Yeah.
all that because I am such an extrovert, but I do like being alone. Like, and I think that also came from me learning to love being with me. I think that came from a lot of personal development.
Totally.
I'm extremely empathic. Man, COVID was so like COVID wasn't hard for me in the sense of like not being positive, I wasn't really fearful, but I could feel everybody else's fear in the
Yeah.
grocery store. Like,
Yeah, just the tension that was ambient.
yes. And it's just like, I can't I was in the grocery store helping people and I didn't even work in the store. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, because I was
Yeah.
just like, come on now, we got to breathe, we got to calm down. Like, because I was feeling that type of stuff. But now I've gotten to the point that I can detach. And I think that's a result of me working on becoming unoffendable. That's just,
I love
and
that.
I've been working on that heavy this year. Um, and it's like, but that has helped me. I knew it was something I needed because the people online, I deal with crazy people in person too. But it's like, you deal with comments, like when your stuff does get some reach to like people that aren't even necessarily your audience, you get comments that are just so off rip,
Mhm.
and it's just like, really? And I know that a lot of people can go into a negative space um
Yeah.
with some of that stuff, and for me, I was the type of person that did like jump around and do all the, I mean, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube.
Mhm.
So like even your social media monogamy is an interesting idea to me because
Yes.
like they're constantly changing. Like, how do you know make sure your message is still clear and still grow with the ever changing algorithms and stuff?
Yeah, so there's a couple things you said, Olivia, that are sticking out to me, and one of them is just like the reality of being disagreed with online, and not even just that, but like sometimes people are straight up cruel, and I think the more well recognized we are, the more authority we have, particularly if we thought lead about something that's a little bit controversial, and or if we have intersecting historically underestimated identities, that can invite a different kind of online vitriol than not. So for example, I work with a number of women of color who are in the DEIB space, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And they are at much greater risk for negative pushback than I, as a white woman who talks about thought leadership, am. So I think it's important to surface that, just because sometimes I think the language around like ignore the trolls or sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, it sounds neutral to say those things, but the reality is that we aren't all at the same risk for getting that kind of pushback, and that's unfair, and it's reality, and it's important to acknowledge that it's the facts. So that's what I get really heated when I talk about this. So that's one thing I wanted to respond to that you shared, Olivia. And I guess a little bit related is this idea of social media monogamy, which ties to some of the principles of micro marketing. And that is, the principle, I guess, that social media monogamy stands on is this idea of less being more. So social media monogamy is a practice that I've identified, or that I've named, of just choosing one social media network exclusively to use. And this really flies in the face of a lot of the advice we get about like being everywhere, or being being in the place that's most popular, or where there's most organic engagement, casting a wide net, making sure people can find you in different places. All of that has merit. I'm not saying that that's all wrong, but my experience and my strong preference is to be able to really go deep in one place rather than going wide and shallow. And I find that as a good fit for my energy and my effort and my skill set. And by cutting off other options, yes, I am potentially cutting off access to other people. And I think so there's a bit of a risk to that, you could argue. And I think from the perspective of positioning yourself as being not for everyone, but really, like you said, for a certain kind of audience, choosing to be available in only one place really lends itself to that. It provides clarity and focus of like, this is where you can find me. This is where you can connect with me. This is where I'm available. Please come in and meet me here, rather than I'm going to go and be everywhere. And, I have some clients who are like, I'm not doing that. That's just not for them. And I respect that. And I have other clients for whom hearing this idea of social media monogamy and being given permission to say no to more things and say a deeper yes to one thing is a tremendous amount of like relief and excitement for them.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, we're talking about options.
Yes, we are. Precisely.
These are options. And I love that we're exploring this because I haven't had someone on to actually explore these options. I feel like I'm too far deep. Like I could just get off of these other places, but I feel like Facebook, for instance, in my situation,
yeah,
the way that Facebook is working now, like I get so many more reactions from the people on Facebook.
Interesting.
And you can't grow it the same, but I mean, now that they have added that Reels aspect to it, they still do grow. Like I get more interactions, and it's funny because now I've got a Christ-driven page too.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a Facebook page that we didn't even care that much about. We put the same content on all pages.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like Jamie's been doing, my partner, she's been doing phenomenal on Instagram the last couple of weekly posts. So we post 6 days a week, and she has gotten like her one yesterday got like 12.5K views.
Dang.
And we're small, like we started this in April. We've got like 600 people on our Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's really good reach for that.
Yeah.
But then it's like on Facebook, we didn't even really care much about Facebook, but like we see how much people are interacting with that. We've got almost 800 something followers on Facebook, like actually like over 800 followers on Facebook. And we weren't even trying to, like, we just put it everywhere. And then we've stopped posting long form videos on YouTube because we just, in this season of our lives right now, it's just not conducive, but we're just posting the shorts. We've just gotten over like 100 people on YouTube. And then we've got over 1,000, like we've got 1,100 on TikTok. Same content. And it blows my mind how different things are more popular on different platforms.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point now that because I've been posted on social for like 3 years, I can post it and forget it. I can really detach. I'd be like, okay, this and that. Like, I know these numbers because we're recently looking at growth. It's not because it's like, oh my God, this is attached to my value. A lot of people starting out in business, I feel like they are so attached to the results on social media. And, to speak to what you were saying with the different people having different things come back to them, like, with us having Christian content, man, listen, I got the Pharisees out here saying that I need to repent. I got people like, dude's about to get blocked, but I got other people just like saying, well, you believe in fairy tales. Okay, listen, if you don't like this content, you can she's a lot nicer than me, because I'm just like, this ain't for you then. I'll
Yes.
and knowing what is for you and what's not for you.
Yeah.
And also understanding, some of these people just have to be so miserable to say stuff that's so negative, to take time out of their day to comment and be like, to be so negative,
It's really hard for me to relate to, Olivia. Yeah, like you take you are allotting some of your finite energy to just being mean. And I guess the only way so far that I've figured out how to understand it is I think people tend to just be primed to be so defensive about their opinions and their worldview. And so the minute someone, no matter who the heck they are, threatens that, they fly off the handle. And it's an odd way that we are. I don't know if that's just a human thing or if it's particularly in the US. I don't think so, or if it's, I don't know. I'm not like a social scientist, but yeah, like I remember my coach once I think she described entrepreneurship as like, or maybe it was leadership as going to school in public. And you really are, if you are building authority and your influence is growing and your audience is growing, you are being seen by more people, and therefore they will see your inevitable foibles. And there's totally some vulnerability and risk in that. And I think for me, like what I try to do with myself and my clients is just be incredibly self-compassionate and like build a thicker skin. I like how you put it with being unoffendable, but just really do our best to let that roll off of us. And yeah, in a way, almost look at it as a green light. I mean, it's hurtful, but it means that we are making an impact. We are reaching people, we are being able to be disagreed with. And so one perspective is like, okay, that's a green light. The other perspective is, like you said, Olivia, like, well, they're just not for you. So you can, from a business perspective and from a personal perspective, just ignore them to the best of your ability. But despite that, like, elementary school rhyme, like sticks and stones can't break my bones, or can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words can totally hurt. And so I think we have to just be real about that as well.
Oh, definitely. It's taken me, and I say it because it's taken me years. It's taken me specific affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
I have specific affirmations when it comes to, not like, one of them is, and it's not said in the right way, but and this is really more a saying, but I'm not going to get pissed off on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let that happen to me. Like, I'm not going to feed into it. I'm not going to, and that's a big one. That's a rule that I have for myself.
It's a good boundary.
Yeah. I only seek the approval of God. That thing right there has changed my life, because I was such a people pleaser. I cared so much about how people viewed me and how they saw me. But in actuality, they never really get to know the real me if they're not really around me. And I'm constantly evolving and changing.
Right.
And why do I need validation from all these other people? Now I am there for who is there. Like, I'm there for the people that need to hear my message. And if you don't need to hear my message, there's plenty of other noise out there for you, like,
absolutely.
So it's really, I think that's helped me develop the thick skin, because I from people that have committed suicide, I've seen them, and I've gotten into it with people online before. I'm not saying I've never had, because there's sometimes I talk about controversial topics.
Right.
Now it's just more so people are just crazier. I think people in general have just gotten crazier. So I mean, it would be nice to have like one social media platform, because and that leads them to your email list,
right.
that you can funnel the same type of marketing. You don't have to, it's less stuff to keep up with. It's more of a minimalistic approach to,
yes.
And I love that, because I was just looking around my office. I'm like, I got so much stuff. I'm so ready to get rid of things. And because I feel like extra things weigh you down. And I understand the freedom that would come from that option of only going with one, or even less, because if you want all the platforms, even scaling back might be a better option for you.
Yeah, I think, well, like you said a little bit ago, it's about choices. We have so many choices, and I like to think of social media, all the different networks we have to choose from, like they're all tools. They're tools we can choose to pick up or put down to facilitate the work. What I think can happen sometimes is, because social media can be so demanding of us, and the algorithms change, and We have, we get a dopamine hit from people's reactions, perhaps. So sometimes social media can start to feel like the work rather than a tool that facilitates the work. But yeah, like, so you have these tools you can choose from. Social media is just one set of tools. There are others. You mentioned email list. There's some other micro marketing tools that I love. But I think the words that you just used, Olivia, minimalism and clutter, are really integral to this just concept of social media monogamy, this idea of eliminating what might feel like to you like clutter, which acknowledges that it doesn't feel like clutter to everyone. But if you feel cluttered up by multiple social media networks, you can declutter those and you can have a more minimalist approach to the social media tool you use. And for some people, that's just a huge relief. And importantly, it doesn't change the effectiveness of the tool, right? So it's not, even though you are in some ways by decluttering, cutting off certain opportunities or certain types of access, it's not a zero-sum game, right? You can then replace that or replenish that with more opportunities and more access in this one social media network, say, by using it more effectively and more thoroughly and with more presence.
And I think at the end of the day, you do have to question, like, what do you want from this?
Yeah.
Like, just like we were talking about in the beginning, you really want to establish, your name, have it clear cut, not just, and some of these things you can't be as clear, even if it is like the same type of content. How it's digested is for the person. And it's like, if there's, and when people are building more so of a relationship with you, when you can invest time into building that relationship with your followers, I think that's a really, we get all these numbers and it's like, okay, well, what do you do with those numbers? Are they engaged? Are they in?
Yeah. What does this even mean? Right. Yeah, there's like an overwhelm of data available to us, and making meaning out of that data is a tall order. So yeah, I coach myself and my clients to be really mindful of the data we pay attention to. But I think to your point, Olivia, about like, what do you want? And I think there's two sides of that. One is like, what do you want these outcomes to be? Like, what do you hope to accomplish on this social media network? But I think equally importantly, and this gets a little bit less airtime, is like, how do you want to feel when you're using this tool? Does it make you feel depleted? Does it make you feel jazzed? Does it make you feel creative? Does it make you feel angry? Like, there's so many options. And so for me, in choosing to be social media monogamous with LinkedIn, using LinkedIn makes me feel the best, and I'm clear on what I want to use it for, and I know that it's successful to do that. So it's a really good fit. That that micro marketing tool is a really good fit for me.
Yeah. And I mean, for your authors, what do you find? And I mean, it depends on the books, I know it, and it depends on where they've already started out. And because that stuff matters too. I find authors doing so many podcast tours.
Yes.
Like,
spoiler alert, that's another micro marketing tool, is podcasting. Yeah, because especially when it comes to, think about what we're doing right now, Olivia. We're having an intimate conversation. Like, we're making eye contact, we're facing each other, we're just talking to each other. And yeah, this is going to go out on the world, and this one-on-one conversation is going to be listenable for as long as the podcast archive keeps it alive, listenable by the whole world if they want. This is a hugely leverageable piece of content that started as an intimate one-on-one conversation. I love that element of podcasting. There's something so intimate about using your, just listening to something. That's like the first way we learn to communicate, is by listening. So anyway, that's another micro marketing tool that I teach in the micro marketing method program. But also, you mentioned authors. Yes. So podcasting is a really popular tactic or strategy. I sometimes get those words confused even now, but it's a really popular way that authors will get themselves and their ideas and their books in front of new people.
Yeah, because I mean, I work with a few different agencies. Like, they just send me people,
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm very
Yeah.
grateful. I'm very grateful. But I've noticed just from that, like, oh, authors are really, and it makes sense because
Hmm.
people that listen to podcasts tend to read books or listen
Yes.
to audiobooks.
Right. Good point.
And so I know for myself, whenever that time comes, I will definitely be doing a lot of podcast tours. And I mean, it's just so fun because I feel like it's such a cool way to meet new people.
Yes.
And I also heard a projection for new how the market's going to change when it comes to people. They're going to get burnt out on the short form content. They're going to want more. They're going to want
Interesting.
more of a longer form video. They're going to want more just longer form content where they can just like have it and listen to the same person, and not because they're going to get burnt out on that short circuit of the emotional roller coaster, basically. Because it's an emotional roller coaster when you're scrolling through online, oh, there's a cute puppy, oh my god, they just had a baby, that like, and wherever you feel in life, like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so great, they're cute, or oh my goodness, that was really earlier, oh my god, I don't have a baby yet. And then
Yeah.
or oh, they just got married, oh, they just did really well in their business, they just hit $1 million in sales. That's great for them if you're in that mental space, or why am I not there, are okay, that's cool. I wonder what they had, depending on what your mindset is. And
Hmm.
then it's, oh my goodness, there's a tragedy over here. Someone just was murdered. Oh, someone's cousin's missing. There's a GoFundMe page for that. Oh, oh, this is political. Let me just mind my business. Like, oh, this is absolutely horrible. It's an emotional roller coaster.
And it's relentless. Like it was pointed out to me recently. It's so obvious in hindsight, but I hadn't thought about it in so many words. But like, you never reach the end of the scroll. You're never done.
Mhm.
And so it's just an endless, relentless, yeah, up and down and up and down and up and up and down and down and down and up. And it's exhausting. And that's at least for me, I find it exhausting. And so that's another reason why choosing social media and monogamy has been such a benefit to me, is I just love saying no to things. I love being like, no, I'm not going to subject myself to that. No, I'm not going to do these things, even though I understand why they're good ideas and that they really suit some people. It's a hard no for me. And I just find that like saying no makes me feel really powerful. It really gives me a sense of like self sovereignty. And it's so satisfying to have those boundaries like yours. Like, I'm not going to get pissed off on social media. So when I imagine, can maybe feel that pissed off feeling rising, okay, I need to step away. This is a no. And yeah, building or yeah, creating and maintaining those boundaries is such a gift to ourselves and to our businesses, to our relationships. They can be awkward and painful at first or throughout, but they're so worth it.
Oh yeah, because I mean, we're like, real life is happening, and and there's so many different things going on. But yeah, I love the fact that you are setting boundaries around your social media. It's our power. The power is within us. And at the end of the day, these platforms just want your attention. They're going to find
Yes.
ways to captivate that attention. Now,
Yeah.
for people that are content creators like me, like I'm excited that there's going to be more people, possibly wanting longer form content, because that might mean that, my podcast, my YouTube will grow even more. However, I have to not be such a consumer of the platforms as well.
Mm,
And setting that boundary too, of not, because that's where I feel like it gets super overwhelming.
yeah.
Um for me, like, I've gotten in such the habit of like, I'm going to post this, I know how to copy, like, cut this, put this for here, put this for here, and it's not that much of a hassle, but it's the scroll.
Hmm. Yeah. And
And
it takes a lot of discipline because, like, those are designed to hijack, kind of our mental wiring, and they're very good at it. And so it takes a lot of discipline to opt out.
and like, and we'll do that. We'll get in the place where it's like super high achievers too. Like we'll have really stressful days, and then there's something we'll do to like numb. That might be drinking, that might be shopping, that might be scrolling.
Totally.
But scrolling is becoming a new addiction.
Yeah.
We lose hours of sleep, we and I don't know what it is about that. Maybe it is the dopamine hit that we get. And everybody don't have this problem. I'm not, but it's something that I know that I'll have to just stop, and I'll like, if I want to watch something, I'll just put on nature shows. I love watching like just the
That's
animals.
awesome.
I love the animals. I was watching something on insects a couple weeks ago. Before that, I was watching something on prehistoric birds, like
That's
the first
so
birds.
cool. I love that.
Yeah. I love just looking at nature and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that this is a beautiful option that you offer. So now, how can people work with you?
Yes. So I work with clients a couple of ways. So I have, as I mentioned, the micro marketing method program where I teach how to LinkedIn, the social media monogamy, and the social media monogamy or the LinkedIn principles that I teach, such as our like 3-1-1 posting strategy. These are applicable across different social media. I just happen to apply them, and many of my clients choose to apply them to LinkedIn. I also, in that program, teach my roundtables networking strategy, as well as how to pitch yourself as a guest on podcasts. So that's a great way to start working with me. You can find links to the program at medusamediagroup.com. And for a shortcut, you can also go to yourlinkedinprofile.com, which is my short free email course about how to create a LinkedIn profile that's effective and enticing to generate leads and opportunities. And yeah, that's a fun one. Like I said, it's short. You can binge it or you can kind of watch it at pace, but that's a great way to like get to know me, make some tweaks to your LinkedIn profile to make it stronger. And then of course you'll be in my email list and you'll be able to get to know me further from there.
Awesome. Well, Eva, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a pleasure. I loved diving into this topic and really touching on social, because that's something that we deal with. We don't really chat about, Yeah,
it's become such a undeniable force in our lives that it's just sort of like, it's just there. And yeah, maybe we don't always like zoom out and talk about how it's serving us or not, or like what it's doing there and like what our options are.
Yeah, seriously. Well, guys, again, check the links in the show notes below to get all of her goodies and connect with her. Thank you so much, Eva.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Empowered Woman, Badass and Unfiltered podcast. If you found any value in this, please consider sharing and subscribing. Now go out and be a badass.